Good evening, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to you on this Thursday, which I believe is St. Patrick's Day, to another Think Legal presentation. Tonight's presentation is entitled Understanding Parental Alienation, an Attorney's Perspective. I was asked to weigh in my thoughts on parental alienation, and I've managed to get quite a bit of what I hope is going to be some useful information to share with you folks tonight. So please do enjoy. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comment box. As always, let's go through the housekeeping and then we'll get started with the formal program. Obviously, house rules and etiquette, please use your real name for register purposes. Secondly, please feel free to type questions, comments in the chat box at any time. We will deal with as many as possible. We're approximately 70 registrants for tonight's webinar. Obviously, not everyone is going to log in, but just to make sure that we go through the program quite quickly and efficiently, if I may ask, please put your questions in the comment box so that we can move through the program. If we have time at the end, which I believe we will, there will obviously be a good opportunity for all of us to weigh in on this very, very interesting, divisive, and shall I dare say it, controversial topic of parental alienation. Right, third point, guys, respectful discussion, dissent, and comments are always welcomed. Most of us attending are family professionals working in different capacities. We all have something to share. We're all here to learn, myself included. Please keep discussion respectful, avoid hate speech, victimization, or belittling attendees. We're all here to learn. And finally, please do not record the sessions or distribute the content without consent. We will be recording this session and we will make it available to everyone. I believe that some of us are getting a bit anxious to get last week's recording. I am working on it. Hopefully that and this recording will go up over the weekend, but I will share those with you once they are ready. Right. For those of you who want to test out some cell phone magic on your phones, switch on your camera now and point it at the screen. You will see on the left-hand side is my business card if you would like to save my contact details, for those of you who don't have it yet. And on the right-hand side, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you were too slow, don't fret. The slides will be distributed for this webinar. Right, guys, so as I mentioned to you, I have prepared tonight's webinar upon request, and I present tonight's webinar upon request with a couple of severe and very, very serious caveats that I want us to get on the same page from the get-go. Number one, guys, understand parental alienation, or as I believe the parlance goes at the moment, contact aversion or refusal, is an extremely divisive issue. There are so many opinions on this topic. So please be aware that what I'm going to give you tonight is going to be based on information that I've been able to glean from case law, from mental health practitioners with whom I have contact, and from legal professionals with whom I have contact. There is no universally accepted definition of parental alienation. We'll have a look at a few definitions that have been postulated by experts a little bit later in this presentation. But for the that there is no universally accepted definition that everyone agrees on. It is still a divisive topic. Your humble presenter is an attorney. He is not a psychologist or a social worker. So please be kind in the Q&A section and don't ask me too many psychology questions because I might hurt myself. Right, then lastly, guys, very, very important. I see quite a lot of mediators in. I see quite a few attorneys in tonight. I see one or two mental health practitioners. Welcome, you're all welcome. Understand that for purposes of this presentation, I've called it understanding. parental alienation, not diagnosing, treating, proving, or disproving parental alienation. Hopefully, after we finish the session tonight, you will have a better understanding of what parental alienation is, what to look out for, and where to position and align yourself. It's not meant to be a session to say now you can go out and tell people that they are or are not alienators and or rejected parents and do therapy on children, etc., etc. Alfred, I see you looking very despondent. I'm so sorry to burst your bubble on that one. Right, I'm just teasing you, Alfred. Right, guys, in terms of the caveats, I do want to share with you, I have dealt with a number of matters where parental alienation has either been alleged and or identified together with or without gatekeeping, whether severe or slight, and different factors. So don't let the caveats scare you off. I have done some reading and I do have some experience in this, and I will try my absolute best. So one of the things that I have been wrestling and grappling with in terms of this presentation is to really get a sense of what exactly alienation. When we speak parental alienation, what is it? Is it a syndrome? Well, North Gauteng High Court in helped a little bit later might disagree. Is it a behavior by a parent? Well, should we really be looking at the parent's behavior? Or is it factors relating to is it a combination of all three? And so I did some reading, and I think where type we can find and use that as a starting point. And one of the reasons that which came into effect in January this year is the ICD-11, the International Classification of Diseases, 11th revision, published by the World Health Organization. Now, why I put this in is it was very, very interesting. A while back, there's a News 24 article about parental alienation now recognized by the World Health Organization, and the link that they had went to the specific section, the QE 52.0, caregiver-child relationship problem. So this is the definition that we get of a child relationship, including a parental relationship associated with significant disturbance in functioning. Now, folks, I don't know whether you'll agree with me. Please indicate in the chat box whether you agree with me or disagree with me. But I don't think this really captures the nub of parental alienation. This refers to a sustained dissatisfaction with disturbance and finally parental alienation. If we look at some of the other definitions a little bit later of some other concepts which I have deemed and which I'll share, dysfunctions and disturbances which can fall within the ICD-11 framework in terms of the World Health Organization's definition of a caregiver-child relationship problem. So we start very broad, and unfortunately, there is not much help over there. The other one that people like referring to, and I'm going to deal with it very early in this presentation, is of course the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of mental disorder, the Psychiatric Association. Now, as most of us in the field of family law and family practice will know, and as I'm sure our mental health practitioner colleagues will attest to, the APA's DSM-5 is quite a universally accepted model. Now, let's have a look at what the DSM-5 contains. The DSM-5 refers to CAPRD. This is the closest that we actually get to our definition or our understanding of parental alienation. And that is a category which should be used when the focus of clinical attention is the negative effects of parental relationship discord, e.g. high levels of conflict, distress, or disparagement on a child in the family, including the child's mental or other medical disorders. Now, once again, folks, can we take parental alienation, the definition which we'll look at a little bit later and which we are going to try and figure out and postulate together, can it fit as a mold onto this concept of CAPRD? Well, the answer is yes, it can, but so can quite a lot of things. So we are looking at negative effects of parental relationship discord. This does not necessarily involve only a case where there is potential alienation or alleged alienation. Just before I forget, guys, Lee Govender, one of our attorneys, has very, very kindly indicated that she will moderate the chat today. Thank you so much for that, Lee. Lee, can I also just ask you, I see there are a few latecomers joining us. Please, if you can just buzz them in. To those who have just joined, very, very warm welcome to you on this Thursday evening. So just to recap, we have the two international frameworks which people very often claim, and I think incorrectly claim, recognizes parental alienation. We've got the child relationship problem in terms of the ICD-11 framework. And we have the concept of CAPRD, child affected by parental relationship distress, in terms of the DSM-5. I've mentioned this earlier. Under CAPRD, there is quite a variety of different types of parental relationship distress, which are set out, which I'll draw your attention to quite a little bit later. Right. So in our quest to try and get to an understanding of exactly what is parental alienation, I am going to be very carefully and very humbly referring to the work of psychologists and psychiatrists in the field. Once again, let's just go back to my caveat in the beginning. I am an attorney. I'm not a psychologist. So if I speak utter nonsense, psychologists, please do correct me, but please do so kindly. It has been a very long week. So there are three works that I want to refer you to, which I'll give you the full citations a bit later. It's the work of Fiedler and Bala in 2010, the work of Warshak in 2006, and then the work of Burnett, Wambold, and Narrow in 2016. All three of these individuals and or groups of individuals have attempted to postulate some sort of definition of parental alienation. Mariki, I'm not sure. Sorry, let me just stop there. Mariki indicates that the signal is a bit bad on her side. Mariki, I see you're also jittering on my side. I don't know whether it is on my connection or your connection is very poor, guys. Please do inform me. Otherwise, Mariki, obviously the recording will be made available to you if your connection drops. Individuals and or groups of individuals that have tried to postulate a definition of parental alienation. Very interestingly, Fiedler and Bala I'll refer to a little bit later in terms of one of the more recent resources which they have put out in terms of parental alienation. Lee, can I just quickly ask you to chime in? Renelle has also indicated that she's having trouble hearing me. Are you hearing me loud and clear? Yes or no? Guys, let me quickly check my internet connection before I go on and we miss out on something. Teams has not, however, castigated me for having a poor connection yet. So let's just have a look. As long as the connection seems stable on this side, I'll proceed. Obviously, I will send the recording. Okay. JP, bad signal my side as well. Right. Please do forgive me. Let me just take it to see if I can get sorted out this side. I see it does appear to be my connection, guys. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to quickly just see if I can reset the connection and then we can reconvene in 2 minutes. My apologies for that. Okay, let's hope that it sorts it out now. I've reset my connection this side. Sorry about that, folks. Quite a few people have indicated to me that it is a little bit jittery. I've got my iPhone hotspot as a backup if it breaks up again. All right. So, thanks, Alfred. I hope the magician hasn't left the room. I am still here, even though I am jittering like a break dancer. All right. So, folks, let's forge ahead as best we can. If it really gets to a point where you physically cannot concentrate, it's so bad, please do let me know. Otherwise, I am going to forge ahead. So, we deal with the work of Fiddler and Bala, 2010, Warshak, 2006, Burnett, Wambold, and Narrow, 2016. Fiddler and Bala have the definition as follows. A child's strong resistance and rejection of a parent that is disproportionate to the parent's behavior and out of sync with the parent and child's previous relationship. That is what they refer to as parental alienation. I had a chat with an advocate this afternoon who is involved in a matter where she was telling me about a matter where the child, in a case of 2 weeks, went from having a fantastic relationship with the father to absolutely demonizing the father in a particularly severe case. And that is where we see this disproportionality and being out of sync with a past relationship. Then, folks, we look at the following definition by Warshak, which, just as an aside, Warshak puts it under the moniker pathological alienation and not necessarily parental alienation. Is a disturbance in which children, usually in the context of sharing a parent's negative attitudes, suffer unreasonable aversion to a person or persons with whom they formerly enjoyed normal relations or with whom they would normally develop affectionate relations. Very similar to Fiddler and Bala's definition. And then finally, Burnett and Wambold and Narrow, which reads as follows. Parental alienation refers to a child's reluctance to have a relationship with a parent without good reason. And I must be frank, folks, I do quite favor Burnett, Wambold, and Narrow's definition just because it is so concise. It is the most recent one as well, and it really nicely sums up what Warshak and Fiddler and Bala have done. So I visually tried to represent it by means of a Venn diagram. These are really the two things that all three of these groups of experts agree on. Factor number one is that the child must be averse to contact. And number two, there must be no good reason for the contact aversion. When those two instances present themselves, then you are most probably dealing with some form of potential parental alienation. For those who joined us a little bit later in the talk, please do remember my big caveat here. The presentation is called Understanding Parental Alienation, not diagnosing, treating, proving, or disproving, unless, of course, you are a clinical psychologist or a psychologist in active practice. Right. So then if we take it further, going through Burnett, Wambold, and Narrow's definition, 2016, they also in the same work distinguish between three different types of parental alienation in levels of severity. So understand, guys, a cow is not just a cow. It can be a Friesian, it can be a Jersey, it can be an Angus. It is not a one-size-fits-all in these incredibly complex issues and complex matters. So under mild parental alienation, according to Burnett, Wambold, and Narrow's framework, the child will resist contact but enjoys the relationship once parenting time is underway. That's very, very telling in terms of interactional analyses and potentially also in terms of voice of the child, where a child will be very, very averse to contact. But once contact is underway, one sees a big change in the child. Then we go on to moderate parental alienation, where the child strongly resists contact and is persistently oppositional during parenting time with the targeted parent. So understand that there is a strong resistance versus just a resistance. So the intensity of the resistance is much more. And also where the mild the mild child, that rhymes, enjoys the relationship once parenting time is underway, the moderate the alienated child will be persistently oppositional during parenting time, and that is under a moderate alienation scenario. Then one gets to the severe alienation scenario, folks, and this is the very, very sad one, which I've seen a few times, where the child persistently and adamantly refuses contact. See the steps here: resists, strongly resists, to where they refuse outright. That is not just a resistance. That is the case of the child in children's court matters who kicks and screams at the social worker at handover time to the extent that they have to send the child back home, which is unfortunately something we see more frequently than we would obviously like. And what is very, very interesting on the postulation or the definition of severe alienation is there is no reference, guys, to what happens during parenting time. And the reason for that is that parenting time simply cannot come to pass. This child refuses contact and may hide or run away, not ride, hide or run away to avoid being with a target parent. So one never really gets to the point where there is contact. And this is obviously the saddest of the sad scenario. We'll look at the decided case of Soller a little bit later, where Judge Kathy Satchwell had a situation like this where, as we say in Afrikaans, die koel is deur die kerk, and it is, for all intents and purposes, too late to do anything. Then I want to look at types of alienator. This is by Prof. Christy Else, or Dr. Christy Else, I think. Yeah, Christy Else. She's a South African. She works with the Family Bridges program. I believe she's down in George, if I'm not mistaken. In 2018, she did a very interesting presentation at the Clark's Family Law seminar, which I was very lucky to attend, where she talked about parental alienation in general, but where she also postulated the different types of alienators. And you will see this echoed in the work of some other experts a little bit later. And although not cited in her work at that stage, I do believe it is referenced on some of the other works we will be looking at later. So there are the three different types of alienator that we know of. We have the naive alienator, we have the active alienator, and then we have the obsessed alienator at the extreme end of the spectrum. The naive alienator, the word naive really should give you a good hint. They generally don't even know that they are alienating, even though they are. And what really sets the naive alienator apart is the fact that they lack any serious intent to harm the child's relationship. My apologies, those are my fur babies running around outside and having a jaw while we're all working. So the naive alienator lacks any serious intent to harm the child's relationship with the target parent. Although the damage is being done, it is not being done intentionally. Often characterized by negative comments regarding the target parent, that is the naive alienator. Christy Else takes it further, and in that presentation draws a parallel between the naive alienator and mild cases of alienation, just as an aside. Then we look at the active alienator. The active alienator has a measure of intent. This is now the big difference between a oopsie and an on purpose. The active alienator intentionally criticizes and undermines the target parent. They realize that their conduct is wrongful and potentially harmful to the child, but they do it anyway. I've been in having discussions with other professionals on this the last week or so. I was very fortunate to have this shared with me regarding a matter where the mom would go to the children and say, listen, no one can know that we're having this discussion. Don't tell anyone, no one loves you like I do. Dad is just a wastrel. Dad is just a this. Dad is just a that. And that is very often the active alienator. Then on the extreme end of the spectrum, folks, we have the obsessed alienator. And I like the definition given by Else in terms of the obsessed alienator. They intentionally work relentlessly to destroy the child's relationship with the target parent. And what is ironic about the obsessed alienator, guys, and this is also from Else's work or from Else's presentation, the obsessed alienator is usually convinced of the righteousness of their behavior, and they lack insight. And the work only mentions lacks insight, but one can only surmise lack insight for the needs of the child, lacks insight for the needs of the other parent, the effect that the alienation would have on the other parent, etc., etc. And I am sad to say I have seen in my years of practice cases such as this, where there is this absolute feeling of righteousness on the part of the parent because they believe in their heart that the other parent is evil and that there should be retribution and they should not see the child. Right, so that is the very, very basic introduction to some experts' works on parental alienation. What I'm going to do, folks, now is I'm going to park very, very briefly after we've now said what is alienation. I'm going to quickly go through two more slides, and then I'd like to go into a very, very short Q&A. We are making some good time. I think I can probably handle one or two matters, one or two questions if they are there. So those who are keen, it is fastest fingers first, and you are welcome to pop up your hands so long. So Before we get there, I would like to tell you that this is obviously a presentation by Vermeulen Attorneys under the moniker Think Legal. It is a legal knowledge sharing initiative which we have started rolling out for family professionals throughout South Africa. Whether you are an attorney, an advocate, a psychologist, a social worker, or mediators, and we especially love mediators, we want to help you to grow your practice, and we want to share our knowledge with you and share your knowledge with us and the community at large. So for that, we do have our Think Legal Family Law WhatsApp group. It is a beehive of activity at the moment, and I really am enjoying seeing quite a lot of you who are here on that group, asking questions and getting very, very involved indeed in terms of sharing knowledge with one another. For those of you who are not yet on the group and who would like to join, please do indicate so in the chat box, and we will assist you to get onto the group. Then a new initiative that I am running, guys, is Think Legal Conversations. You will find it on YouTube, and I will share some links a little bit later. It is very, very early days. We have a few videos on there, but it's basically an interview format discussion between myself and also other colleagues with industry professionals. Then obviously our webinars, which you are all patently and acutely aware of, and then also an initiative called Law in 3 Minutes or Less, which we are using as explainers. For the mediators amongst you, we've recently rolled out a series on uncontested divorce, how that works. Please do go and have a look at that, and if you can find use for it in your practice, do let me know. Upcoming webinars, folks, we have one next week, and then I am going to take a 2 or 3 week break, most probably. And next week's presentation is going to be called Demystifying Spousal Maintenance. We are going to be looking at Section 7.2 of the Divorce Act in all its troublesome glory, and we will be trying to make sense of spousal maintenance in the context of South African law, both in terms of final orders for maintenance as well as Rule 43 and Rule 58 orders. So please do let me know. Excellent. I've got a few guys indicating that they would like to be added to the group. To those who have just joined us, very, very warm welcome. We're going to go into a quick Q&A before we go into some notable case law on the issue of parental alienation. Right, Mariki, I see that your hand is up first. Please do shoot. Please don't make it a tough one. It's been a long week.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it simple. You remember we spoke the previous time when we had a quick conversation about this. You said
yes.
there was a case where they locked up the parent, the alienation parent, who of the one who's doing the alienation. I don't know what you call them. For 30 days. But now I'm sitting with the case and I need to deal with it. But this girl is 12 years old. She's already cutting herself. She's cutting her wrist. She's cutting everywhere and everything. And she doesn't want to have anything to do with that, with her father now at this moment. So if we have to move her, or if she have to do the father, who is really not guilty, it's going to get worse. Those children are not going to be happy if they hear, okay, now mother is sitting in jail for 30 days because they must be at the father.
Okay. Mariki, so I want to answer your question in two parts. Understand one thing. Yes, there are cases where parents have been either arrested. I have knowledge of a particular case where the mom was arrested, got out on bail, didn't spend a whole 30 days in prison. However, understand that it is not that they are being locked up for alienation. This happened in the context where there was litigation. The court made an order in terms of phasing in contact. The alienator parent started feeling panicky, took the children in that case, abduct. Now we are faced with a court order over here for the children to be handed over to the alienated parent or the target parent for contact. The alienator takes the children and runs with full knowledge of the order. That is contempt of court. So that is where they've been taken on. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of waves lately with contempt of court matters. I know there was a webinar some time back, also on a contempt of court matter that took place in the Cape, where I think it was either their deputy judge president or the judge president did something very, very interesting and did a particularly harsh suspended sentence for the mom. In that case, however, the children were very keen to go to dad. The minute there was an order, the children went to dad. So is that alienation or not? If we go back to the postulations of Fiddler and Bala, Warshak, Burnett, Wambold, and Narrow, and we look at the requirements of that there be an aversion to contact and that there be no good reason for the contact aversion, that's not necessarily parental alienation. So understand contempt of court goes with parental alienation. Very often it is an alienating strategy potentially utilized, but there is no legal precedent at the moment for someone being locked up where the court said you are an alienating parent, therefore I am locking you up. There are arguments, guys, just as an aside to answer Mariki's question, a second one. There are some who argue that it falls within the definition of child abuse. I think it is in terms of the DSM-5 definition, but I haven't seen any legal precedent for it, so I haven't included it. Ek wil nie spooke opjaag nie. The clever guys with the robes on the bench need to say first what is potentially child abuse.
Ek moet plan maak nou met hierdie mediasie.
So what you can potentially do, something I've heard very good things about it, and I promise you I'm not on the payroll. I haven't personally referred any matters to them, but the counsel that I spoke to regarding her parental alienation matters spoke very highly of Family Bridges. It is very expensive, as I understand it, but Family Bridges is one of the big treatments at this stage. Just Google Family Bridges, you'll get quite a lot of info there. That is, in fact, I was speaking, taking Christy Elsa's name in vain earlier. She's one of the big proponents of Family Bridges in South Africa. Alfred, you've got a question for me. Just unmute yourself.
Unmuting myself.
There we go.
I think we need, or from my understanding, rather let me approach it from that point of view. From my understanding, first of all, those definitions of parent alienation that you have looked at, in my opinion, are not parent alienation. From the training that I've had, parent alienation is something that a responsible person, being a guardian or parent or whatever, puts onto a child, and the child, that is parent alienation, and the child suffers a parent alienation syndrome. So
so what I'm going to do, Alfred, and I'm going to stop you there. I've actually got a whole slide devoted to this later on, parental alienation versus parental alienation syndrome, from a work on the topic. So hold on a sec. We're going to get there. I promise. Watch this space.
And just one thing, just so that people can think about it, maybe the medical professionals with us, the social workers and that, I don't know how many we have on this webinar, is, does parent alienation at a later stage lead to estrangement, where a child is old enough and actually says, listen, I'm not going to see a parent any longer?
There's actually a slide on that as well. I love it. I love it, Alfred. It's like you are laying out the rest of the webinar for me.
Sorry.
No, it's great. No, you must ask. It's a very, very good question. And what we're going to look at a little bit later, in terms of what are the others, one of them is parental estrangement, which we're going to look at. So watch this space. We are going to go there. All right. I'm going to, Lee, I see you had your hand up, but I see you have put it on the chat box. So I'm going to forge ahead. I'm going to go into some notable case law. I've been very fortunate to have been made aware of a few unreported cases which have landed very recently. Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to get my mitts on them. I am meeting with counsel on Tuesday, and we are going to compare notes over lunch. So hopefully once I have those judgments, I will share them on our Think Legal group for you guys as well. But let's go through the ones that I was able to find. And the first one I want to do is go back to the halcyon days of 2003, ladies and gentlemen, back when iPhones were model number 4 or number 3, and back before we all had fiber in our homes and Teams was the new normal. This is a very interesting judgment by Satchwell J. from the South Gauteng High Court, and Judge Kathy Satchwell did something very, very interesting in this matter and something very controversial. I'm going to ask you guys to keep your comment until the end before we decide or debate this, or if you have any comments, you can put it in the comment box. This is a reported case. It is in the SA Law Reports, citation 2003-5 SA 430 W. It's the old Witwatersrand local division. Now, at this stage, it is the South Gauteng local division. For those of you who are interested in getting your mitts on this judgment, it comes at a price, and that price is having a cup of coffee with me over Teams. But I am happy to give it to you. There's also in this particular judgment a very important definition in terms of what is the role of the family advocate, what is the role of a curator, curatrix ad litem, and or a legal representative for children. So that is the South Gauteng judgment of Sola Nomine Inficio versus G and another 2003. I'm not going to go into the full history of this matter, but this is a matter where there was most certainly alienation, and I'm going to refer to paragraph 50 of the judgment. And this is copied verbatim from the judgment, and I will share this with you. Experts see parental alienation syndrome arising primarily from the combination of parental influence and the child's active contributions to the campaign of denigration. The alienating parent is viewed as a responsible adult who elicits or transmits a negative set of beliefs about the target parent. Now, Mr. Carr was one of the experts that testified. Identified stages in PAS could be seen in the relationship of K, who's the child, with Mr. G, and K with Mrs. G. Here are some of the factors. In terms of parental alienation syndrome, PAS, found in that case. The alienated children parrot the obsessed alienating parent. So once again, guys, you remember we spoke about the obsessed alienator earlier? There it comes out again, back in 2003, Pre-Children's Act. The child does not want to visit or spend time with the targeted parent. Many of the child's beliefs are enmeshed with the beliefs of the alienator. The child is not intimidated by the court being so caught up in the alienating parent's web and feels so empowered by the alienating parent that no authority can intimidate them. Goes back to your point there, Mariki. No authority can intimidate this child. Hulle wil niks weet nie, nothing. They are a law unto themselves. Come on, bring it on, do your worst. There is an absence of guilt as to how the child behaves towards the targeted parent, and the child shares in the cause of the obsessed alienator. So what I've done, folks, is I've done a nice cheat sheet for you in terms of parental alienation syndrome and how Judge Kathy Satchwell set it out in Solar back in 2003 upon the testimony of inter alia Mr. Carr and another expert whose name eludes me at the moment. So here are the 6 factors. The child parrots the obsessed alienating parent. The child does not want to visit or spend time with a targeted parent. Their beliefs are so enmeshed, or they are enmeshed with the beliefs of the alienator. So there's an enmeshed relationship. They are not intimidated by the court, being so caught up in the alienating parent's web, and feel so empowered by the alienating parent that no authority can intimidate them. Absence of guilt as to how the child behaves towards the targeted parent. And then finally, they share in the cause of the obsessed alienator. Now, something very, very sad happened in this case, and this goes to paragraph 53 of the judgment. I am reluctantly compelled to accept that K is uncontrollable when it comes to the issue of custody. He has made up his mind and will not be deterred by his mother, the courts, or threats of custodial care. Very, very sad outcome indeed. And this is where I think the understanding of the court shines through, that in some cases, the ship really has sailed and there is not much that you can do. The next one is an unreported judgment, folks. Helped AJ in the North Gauteng High Court. This one I will also share. Unfortunately, the only version of this judgment I have is not redacted. So I still do need to redact the parties' names. I don't want to put anything out there with the parties' names included. I've also taken out the case number on this slide just to protect the parties' identities. This case is still pending. The case was referred to case management as far as I am aware. That is still pending. So I am going to keep my comments on this case fairly short. What is interesting about this case, moving away from the ratio behind what the judge did in this case, and away from the merits of the case, is what she says in terms of parental alienation syndrome. What I can tell you, folks, I have discussed this matter with quite a few colleagues, including senior counsel, and it seems there is some criticism on the case in that there was a reliance on the work done in Cardiff, Wales. I think it was for Kafka's, for the, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, for the equivalent of law reform in the UK. However, there was no testimony led in respect of that research. So this case is capable, respectfully stated, of criticism based on that, as a big caveat before we go into it. Judge writes, in this case, over the past number of years, the courts have increasingly been approached on the basis of alleged parental alienation. Too often in divorce or separation situations, all children resisting contact with the non-residential parent are improperly labeled alienated, and parents who question the value of contact in these situations are hastily labeled alienating parents. It would seem that despite an overabundance of papers written by academics, legal and mental professionals, there is a lack of empirical evidence on the topic. So 2 paragraphs very close to one another that the judge has written in her reasons for judgment. The first one I actually do tend to agree with in paragraph 80 from a legal professional's point of view, or from an attorney's point of view. I have been referred a number of matters where parties swear high and low there is alienation, and then the expert report lands and says, actually, you know what, this child is just actually getting tired of this parent's nonsense, or this parent is behaving themselves badly, and that is why there is a reluctance to have contact. The second paragraph that I've cited here, paragraph 82, lack of empirical evidence on the topic, I don't agree with as much. There certainly is a lot of discussion in this regard. There certainly is a lot of controversy, a lot of disparate opinions. I see that our chat box, despite us being a fairly wee group today of 26 people, the chat box is very, very busy. And it just illustrates the fact that it is a very contentious topic. And it is one in respect of which there is no overriding framework. And we will get to why that is. Or when I say overriding framework, I mean no universally accepted, this is what it is and it is nothing else. It is this and this is all that it is in a little box. So let's go on to some resources to better understand parental alienation. Okay, the first resource I want to share with you folks is a resource which I call What Parental Alienation Is Not. And this is not from my own words. This is from a culmination of the resources which I have shared and cited earlier. Parental alienation is not necessarily curtailing of contact. It is not just curtailing of contact. Whilst curtailing of contact may be part of an alienator's modus operandi and or their strategy, it is not in and of itself alienation. Let's look at the example of where contact is curtailed between, let's say dad is the primary resident parent. Mom is a drug addict living in a drug nest with previously convicted felons who are a danger to her and or possibly to the child. She has a history of physical abuse towards the child, for argument's sake. In such case, curtailing contact is not necessarily alienation. It is what happens mostly in those types of cases, is that there will be a curtailment of contact and that there will be an investigation that ensues. Then we have failure to permit contact as prescribed by a court order. Once again, it is part of the strategy, and this is what I explained to you earlier, Mariki. It is contempt of court. It's good old contempt of court. That's what it is. You have sight of a court order, you have knowledge of a court order, and you disobey the court order with intent to disobey the court order without any legal justification to do so. It is not necessarily parental estrangement, and this comes back to your point earlier, Alfred. And this comes also out of, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Fiddler and Barlow's work. I'll just have to clarify it. Parental estrangement is not parental alienation. This is a scenario where there is a reasonable basis for the child to be averse to contact. So remember this postulation that we had earlier. There is an aversion to contact is step one. There must be no good reason for the contact aversion is step two, if we look at these three definitions. Whereas in the case of parental estrangement, we have the contact reluctance, the contact aversion. But in cases of parental estrangement, there is a good reason. Consider substance abuse cases, family violence, etc. So there is a distinction to be drawn between alienation and estrangement, parental alienation and parental estrangement. Then we have another scenario, which is loyalty conflict, which we do see frequently. And I feel very clever having cited a lot of very clever psychologists who've figured this stuff out. And loyalty conflict is a scenario where a child feels divided loyalty between feuding parents. And I'm sure all of us have seen that. Then we have the scenario of gatekeeping. This occurs when a parent restricts contact between the child and the other parent and acts as a gatekeeper. It may form part of an alienation strategy, but not necessarily alienation in and of itself. Let's consider this simply from a position of having read up on this with parental estrangement. In this case, there is a good justification. Under gatekeeping, there could also, in some instances, be justification, which I pointed out down here. So let's sketch the family dynamic of the alienator, the target parent, and the child. So we have the alienator and the child over here. We have the enmeshed relationship between the two over here, and the target parent is over there. You will note there is no overlap between the child and the target parent. This is not a case where the child is just being kept from the other parent, but is actually very, very happy to go to the other parent when given the opportunity to do so. Right. Let's go on to the next slide. In this slide, I quote from A Practical Approach to the Children's Act, 2nd edition, Bosman, Sadie, and Corrie. And this goes to your point earlier, Alfred, the difference between parental alienation and parental alienation syndrome. Very important, folks. Parental alienation, the focus is on the parent's behavior. It is generally reversible through education. Alienation occurs without affecting the child's belief, and it is not so severe, e.g. parents occasionally calling other parents names. Here, once again, and this is verbatim, in fact, from that work, you have naive and active alienators. And I'm drawing these parallels because I know this is an information overload. So let's quickly go back to what else referred to in the 2018 seminar that you gave. The naive alienator lacks serious intent to harm. The active alienator intentionally criticizes and undermines, but they are a far cry from the one on the right being the obsessed alienator. Okay, so that is under parental alienation. Then we go into parental alienation syndrome. The focus is squarely on the child's behavior. It is almost impossible to reverse. And this is once again verbatim from the textbook. The child becomes an active participant with the alienating parent in degrading the targeted parent. Once again, let's go back to this sketch and understand that this is the visualization, in my opinion, of alienation, where there is no unit anymore. There is no parent number one on this side, parent number two on this side, and the child moves between the two. The child is squarely in the court of the alienated parent eventually. Attacks are severe enough to destroy the child's relationship with the other parent. More often, these parents are, once again, obsessed. So here is where we can start seeing some patterns. So we have parental alienation on the left, which they refer to usually naive and active alienators, and parental alienation syndrome on the right, in which case we see the obsessed alienator. All right, so let's go to what are the signs. And this, once again, same citation from Bosman, Sadie, and Corrie. Parental alienation, the signs that you need to look out for. Supporting the child's refusal to visit the other parent without reason. Now understand, let's just go one back again, and I'm sorry for laboring the point. Parental alienation, the focus is on the parent's behavior, not on the child's behavior. And parental alienation syndrome, the focus is on child's behavior. So the parent supports the child's refusal to visit the other parent without reason. The parent gives the child details of why the marriage failed and the divorce ensued. Second bullet point. There is rigid enforcement by the parent of a visitation schedule to get back at the former spouse. So one can there see the active alienator, not necessarily the naive alienator. The parent asks the child to choose one parent over the other. The parent asks the child to spy, and the parent will rescue, open quote, close quote, the child from the other parent when there is no danger. Then we go on to parental alienation syndrome. I'm not going to go back to the previous slide and belabor the point too much. There is parental alienation syndrome, which is then focused on the child. There is a relentless hatred for the target parent from the child. The child refuses to visit or spend time with the target parent. The reasons for not wanting contact being based on what the alienating parent tells the child. Brainwashing. This brainwashing is not my embellishment. This is how it appears in the textbook. Holding of irrational beliefs by the child. Not being intimidated by the court's authority. Those of you who were paying attention on St. Paddy's Day, we go back to Sola. No force will intimidate this child. They are a law unto themselves. They have no capacity to forgive past indiscretions. Child, once again. The hatred can extend to the target parent's extended family. And then obviously one gets to say sexual allegations and divorce potentially. False sexual abuse allegations sometimes emerge in the context of PAS. I heard a stat the other day of the percentage of sexual abuse allegations that end up being proven false. And I'm not going to quote it here, but it was quite substantial. It was quite scary. Folks, the final resource I would like to share with you before I go into what I call the conclusion of this talk, are 5 tips to dealing with these types of matters, and very practical tips, hopefully. I want to share with you an incredibly profound resource which was shared with me last week by a psychologist, colleague, friend of mine. And this is work done by Fiedler, Bala, and Saini in 2013 in an article called Children Who Resist Post-Separation Parental Contact. It is a checklist of what to look out for in these different people. So let's look at the behavior of the alienated child. I'm sharing this with you folks, not to go and make diagnoses of parental alienation. Once again, huge caveat like before. It's about when to know that perhaps I should refer this matter to a professional to investigate. Nothing more, nothing less. Mediators take intense note. This is stuff that you will quite easily pick up in your mediation sessions. The opinion of parents is one-sided. All good or all bad. The child will idealize one parent and devalue the other or demonize the other. Second point, there is vicious vilification of the rejected parent. There is a campaign of hatred. Trivial, false, and irrational reasons to justify hatred. Reactions and perceptions are unjustified or disproportionate to the parent's behaviors. The child talks openly and without prompting about the rejected parent's perceived shortcomings. The child will extend hatred to the extended family and pets of rejected parent. Hatred by association, in other words. There is no guilt or feelings of ambivalence, and that's something that for those of you who do go and look up Sola, it is something that featured there as well. There is no ambivalence regarding the malicious treatment, hatred, etc. There is a stronger but not necessarily healthy psychological bond with the alienated parent than with the rejected parent. There is anger at a rejected parent for perceived abandonment. They blame that parent for the divorce in the context of divorce. The speech about the rejected parent is brittle, a litany, obsessed. It has an artificial quality. The effect does not match words. There's no conviction. They use adult language and it has a rehearsed quality. You can see where the gross maternal or paternal influence would shine through. Stories are repetitive and lacking in depth and detail. They mimic what their siblings report rather than their own experience. There is a denial of hope for reconciliation, no acknowledgement of desire for reconciliation. They express worry for their preferred parent. They have a desire to care for that parent. Or there is a defensive denial that the child is indeed worried about that parent. That is the behavior of the alienated child. Now, this is from Fiedler, Bala, and Saini 2013. if I understand that work correct, folks, you don't have to exhibit this whole laundry list. As long as there are a few present, then I think it might be safe to consider referring the matter to a professional to investigate fully. Let's look at the behavior of the favored parent. And this is very interesting because when I had a look at the document when it arrived, there was 1 page on the alienated child, half a page on the alienated parent or the rejected parent, and 2 pages on the favored parent. So have a look very carefully at these parents when you sit with them if you want to try and pick up on these signs. They insist that the child has the right to make decisions about contact. And it's something there is traction for this in discourse between legal professionals is what is the use of the voice of the child in alienation cases. Legal Aid a while back had a presentation where their representative made the mistake of saying, you know, we don't believe that the child has a voice but not a choice. The child must have a choice. And you saw 30 attorneys in Africa jumping up saying, nonsense, 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 nonsense. Very, very interesting and comical indeed. But if we can bring it back to the seriousness of it, in these types of cases, the child has a voice, but is the voice necessarily accurate? Is it necessarily fair? Is it necessarily what is in the child's best interest for their voice to be not just heard, but to be considered binding and or prescriptive in the circumstances? They rarely talk about the other parent. They are uninterested in the child's time with the other parent after contact. They give the child a cold shoulder or silent treatment, or they're moody after the child's return unless the child expresses dissatisfaction about contact. Subtly starting to condition the child to say you are not allowed to enjoy your time with the other parent. There are no photos of the rejected person in the home. They remove reminders of the other parent. They refuse to hear positive comments about the rejected parent. They are quick to discount the child's good times as trivial and unimportant. There is no encouragement of calls by the child to other parent between contacts. They rationalize that the child does not ask. Well, they don't ask. Why must I encourage them to phone their dad or their mom? They don't ask. They tell the child that fun things that were missed during the child's time with the other parents. Yeah, you know, you were sleeping over at dad's. We went to Spur and your sister had an ice cream and it was so nice. Susan, tell your brother about the ice cream that you had. They indulge the child with material possessions and privileges. They set few limits or they are rigid about routines, rules, or expectations. They refuse to speak directly to the other parent. They refuse to be in the same room as the other parent or in close proximity. They do not let the rejected parent come to the door to collect the child. They have no concern for missed time with the other parent. They make statements and then deny what was said. Body language and nonverbal communication reveal a lack of interest, disdain, and disapproval. They engage in inquisition of child after time spent with the other parent. The rejected parent is discouraged or refused permission to attend school events and activities. Telephone messages, gifts, and mail from the other parent to child are destroyed, ignored, or passed on to the child with disdain. Page 2. Distorts any comments of the child that might justify the accusation about abusive parenting or negative behavior. Does not believe that the child has any need for a relationship with the other parent. When the child calls from the other parent and appears quiet or uncommunicative, the parent wrongly assumes pressure from the other parent. The child is not comfortable with the rejected parent or evidence of bad parenting, rather than child's discomfort with the tension. They portray the other parent as dangerous, may inconsistently act fearful if the other parent in front of the child. They exaggerate negative attributes of the other parent and omit anything positive. Delusional false statements repeated to the child distorts history and other parents' participation in child's life, claims other parent has totally changed since the separation. Projection of own thoughts, feelings, and behavior onto other parent. We see that very frequently in acrimonious matters. Does not correct child's rude, defiant, and or omnipotent behavior directed toward the other parent, but would never permit the child to do this with others. Convinced of harm when there is no evidence. False or fabricated allegations of sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. And we know this. This is the locus classicus of alienating strategies. They denigrate and exaggerate flaws of rejected parent to child. They say the other parent left us, divorced us, doesn't love us. Over-involves the child in adult matters and litigation. Child required to keep secrets and spy report back on the other parent. Child required to be a messenger. Overt and covert threats to withdraw love and affection from child unless they reject the other parent. Extreme lack of courtesy towards the rejected parent, and relocation for minor reasons and with little concern for the effect on the child. And that's why we're also seeing quite a lot of interesting case law in terms of relocations, and particularly international relocations. Now, folks, I think in terms of the behavior of the child, which we've gone through, some of it might be interesting, some of it might be a little bit eyebrow raising. In terms of the alienating parent or the favored parent, I don't think there's anything new. I don't think there's anything that we say, sure, I didn't know that that's how they behave themselves. But what blew my socks off, ladies and gentlemen, is the behavior of the rejected parent. And it was so interesting to see this paradigm of the faults that you can find in the rejected parent, which may be indicative of alienation, in terms of the shortcomings, rather than portraying the alienated parent as the poor little innocent flower. They are not always nice. They are not always good. They are not always noble, but they are parents. And the question is then, do they deserve this treatment? Yes or no? Let's look at these factors, which really, really blew my mind when I read them, because it really changes that paradigm of having to think that the poor alienated parent is a good person, or even the poor alienated parent. They have a harsh, rigid, and punitive parenting style. They have outrage at the child's challenge to their authority, passivity and withdrawal in the face of conflict. They are immature, self-centered in relation to the child. They lose their temper. They are angry, demanding, intimidating character traits, but not level of abuse. They are counter-rejecting behavior. Well, the child rejects me, I reject them right back. They lack an empathic connection to the child. They have inept and unempathic pursuit of child, pushes telephone or cell phone calls, letters, unannounced or embarrassing appearances at school or activities, the desperation of having contact with the child. They are dismissive of child's feelings and attitudes. They use guilt. They attempt to induce guilt. They may use force to reassert their parental position. They vent rage. They blame the alienating parent for brainwashing the child, and they take no responsibility, obviously, because the control has been taken from them. So I do encourage you folks to keep these behaviors, etc., in the back of your head, of your mind at least, when you deal with mediations or litigation or supervised visits or whatever you do in your practice. If you are a psychologist, please do chime in our discussion slot a little bit later and tell me what your thoughts are. Is this on point? Is it nonsense? Right. So having gone through everything, I would like to start wrapping up. It is getting late in the day, and I have my dear little one who I would like to see before going to bed. So let's wrap it up with my 5 very basic and hopefully very obvious tips to navigating parental alienation matters. Number 1, Understand, folks, that parental alienation is a controversial and extremely complex topic. At present, there is no universally accepted definition of parental alienation or parental alienation syndrome, as far as I'm aware. If you have one, please share it with me, and I will eat my humble pie. Discussions regarding parental alienation have great potential to turn into arguments. And we see that in our own session today. There are various different opinions, views, experts, etc., etc. So it is a controversial and extremely complex topic. Let's take it a step further. Understand that we are looking at an analysis of a unit of people, generally 3 people in your love triangle, as it were. Your alienator, alienated child, and rejected parent. One needs to look not only at the psychological profile and behavior of one person, but of 3, as well as the dynamic between the 3 of them. So I really am a big proponent that our psychologists who do this type of work really do deserve danger pay, because it is incredibly, incredibly complex. Number 2 takes us to our experts. Leave the conclusions to the experts. And I've seen this so many times. People loosely just talk about this is alienation, that is alienation. Careful. Do not put a label on something unless and until you have a report from a qualified expert. It's okay to suspect. It's okay to exercise caution, but don't label unless you are absolutely certain. The reason is labels cause damage. Labels cause stigmas. Labels cause self-fulfilling prophecies. Labels cause acrimony. I had a matter a while back where, in the context of mediation, the parties had a forensic investigation done into best interests of the children. And the minute that report landed, mediation went out the window. Why? Because all of a sudden there were labels. Yes, they were well-educated labels and they were well-formulated labels, but all of a sudden the mediation couldn't continue. Right, number 3. Understand that if you look hard enough, you will find it. It's the number 23 effect. If you look hard enough for parental alienation, you can fault any person in any circumstance, in my opinion, of exhibiting some of the behaviors that we have here in our Fiddler, Bala, and Saini 2013 work. Look hard enough, you'll find it. Which takes us to the corollary, number 4. And I put the unicorn up there. I really hope you guys notice the unicorn. Parental alienation and parental alienation syndrome is real, in my opinion. We see the effects of it. We are not necessarily qualified to diagnose it. And whilst the North Gauteng in DM and OM said that there's a lack of empirical evidence, I think we can all agree that we see the effects and the devastating effects on families of parental alienation and of parental alienation syndrome. So these are the 2 corollaries. Don't look everywhere for it, because you're going to find it if you look hard enough. But also don't say it is fairy stories, because it's not. It exists, it is real. We need to find the middle ground, and we need our experts to help us find that middle ground. And then finally, guys, most importantly, do not under any circumstances attempt therapeutic interventions if you are not qualified to do so. We go back to the Solo case. It was at that stage so advanced that the court found that this child was uncontrollable. If we start trying to intervene without the proper training and the proper programs, we can, with the best of intent, do a hell of a lot of harm to children and to family units that are already in trouble. That's not to say that we must not do what we can to try and assist, but do not play therapist if you are not a specialist in these types of matters. Right. On that note, it is 10 to 7. I think we can run with the Q&A until probably, let's say, 7:30, if time permits.
The information contained in this video is distributed free of charge for educational purposes. Whilst we have taken all reasonable steps to ensure that the information contained herein is correct and up to date, insofar as the law in South Africa is concerned, the law remains a nuanced and complex field of study, replete with many exceptions and conditions. Please, therefore, do not utilize this information as legal advice, which it is not. When in doubt, consult with a legal professional. For more information, please feel free to contact our offices.